I told you, I said, if they do, they got this. He wrote that piece of paper on the left.
Hey! All right, how are you? Remember me? I did a couple of times. I don't know. That's okay. All right. What exactly happened? Absolutely. Yeah.
Go with them. I can't now. No, I can't. They don't want me to film.
You should film that.
Ted's going.
Hey, Rob Truthy fans. Call me technical difficulty. No meeting today. You can read all about it soon on the post. Oh my God. It only gets better and better.
Supervisor, members of the town board, commissioners here now, but earlier this morning, prior to the commencement of the meeting, it came to my attention and the board's that documents or different pages were disseminated and left on every seat in the hearing room by one of our residents. Just to point out that the resident was aware of new rules of decorum that were promulgated and adopted by this town board on April 5th, 2016, and the entirety of the new rules of decorum were read into the record that day by Assistant Town Attorney Matthew Rose. At that point, the board decided that what was disseminated and left on every seat was violative of the rules as adopted by the board. The items were collected up and presented back to the resident, and he was asked to, take them back home with him, and certainly welcome at that point to stay in the meeting. What's important to point out is, I think at that point, rather than come up, either not disseminate them again, or in the alternative, come up and address the board as to its ruling on the rules of decorum, he chose then to individually hand out the same items that he was asked to take back to every single person. It was at that point that the police were called and that the resident was asked to leave the meeting.
Okay, and then at some point thereafter, the police arrived at, the Nassau County Police Department arrived here at Town Hall, and Justin, Commissioner McCaffrey, you engaged the police button to.
Right, just one of the things, just want to emphasize for all the residents who were present that, in effect, a warning was given, and this particular individual was asked to take back the information. And again, I want to point out that, I think what's reasonable under those circumstances is either to not disseminate it, or at a minimum, come up to the town board and request that they reconsider what he had attempted to do. So I just want to be sure that that is accurately portrayed. The board didn't make a decision in a vacuum, but they certainly gave him every opportunity to participate publicly.
By the way, if you said it, I'm sorry. In particular, what was violated of the rules of decorum? Was it the mere handing out? I don't think it was the mere handing out of the litter.
No, I'm sorry, I don't know if maybe the council.
Well, I think Rebecca's going to want to address that.
Right, there was information relative to her and her background, multiple pages that were handed out that were, in our views, clearly violative of the decorum policy as promulgated on April 5th. So I don't know if the councilwoman wants to, in any further detail, address that at this point.
Well, she'll get that opportunity. Okay. Can you read the provisions of the code where I want to be clear about this?
Again, I'm reading for Resolution 184-2016. Any person making offensive, insulting, threatening, insolent, slanderous, or obscene remarks, or who becomes boisterous, or who makes threats against any person or against public order and security while in the boardroom, shall be forthwith removed at the direction of the presiding officer, unless permission to continue is granted by the majority vote of the board members present. So again, just pointing out that I think what's reasonable under the circumstances is for the resident who feels aggrieved to at least come up and acknowledge what happened with the board and give the majority of the town board an opportunity to reconsider the decision they made. That did not happen here, so I just want to be clear.
All right, let's find out what did happen here. We'll go to you, Commissioner.
We asked Mr. Rickett if he would step outside. The officer didn't want to have the conversation here in the meeting. We went outside to the parking lot, which I was present for. The officer explained to them that they also reviewed the resolution and felt that he was violating the resolution by handing out the material. We explained to Mr. Rickett that the problem is handing it out in the building. Had he been handing them outside, he would have been welcome to hand out things outside. But the issue was that he was handing them out in the building, leaving them on seats and things like that.
And did there come a point where a decision was made as to whether or not the resident would stay or not stay?
Yeah, he was going to come back inside, and I explained to them that he had already violated the decorum policy, and that he would not be allowed back inside. He agreed that he wouldn't go back inside. He didn't agree with my opinion, but he agreed with that he would not come back inside.
Okay, so the dialogue between the police and the resident resulted in, I guess, an agreement that
He would not come back inside. He was very civil. There was no problems or anything like that.
the police didn't threaten, menace, or reject him?
There
Or
was no offer of arrest or tickets or anything like that. It was
Okay.
very civil on all sides.
All right, Councilwoman Alesia, because you were the subject matter of the materials that was distributed. By the way, how many originally distributed? Physically distributed, handed out to people? Or?
They were both. They were placed on seats and physically handed to people in the
All right, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Supervisor, and I have to say I'm a little disappointed that I have to, but I'm very, very proud of my resume and my background, and I'm sorry for all of you that you're going to have to sit through my going through it, but since it's been called into question, for those that are interested, I graduated high school in 3 years.
Well, before you do that, I don't have the literature in front of me. I think the literature was on a source on your record.
Yeah, absolutely, we can talk back up to that. The author, I guess it's Robert Ritt, who also sent an email to the entire town board as well as to Newsday as well as to ABC News, claiming that it is impossible that I could have achieved the things I quote-unquote claim on my resume. Stating that I published false accolades, that I'm guilty of stolen valor, and then doubled down on it by saying I'm showing evidence of my guilt by removing pages from the internet. So, by the way, it's interesting that the person putting this out there is a former law enforcement officer, because I don't know if he did such a great sleuthing job on this case. The webpage in question that he handed out states at the bottom that, first of all, it's under my maiden name, and states that I'm newly married and live in Queens with my husband. And anyone who's been attending meetings knows very clearly that I live in Plainview, and that I've been married for over a decade. Then it also attaches, or I guess part of what's called into question, is my LinkedIn page, where it was posted, I know that I did something wrong, because there's no mention of the DA's office on my LinkedIn page. Well, I have 2 LinkedIn pages. I have one for my private enterprise, which is I work for a travel agency called Smart Flyer in New York, and I love working there. And I have a separate page for that, and at the bottom of that page, it says, if you're looking for information on Town of Oyster Bay matters, you can connect with me on LinkedIn as Councilwoman Rebecca Alesia. And on that page, which has a separate picture and has my town biography, I have my resume, including the district attorney's office. So I shudder to think what kind of police officer wouldn't bother to thoroughly investigate the evidence that he's putting forward. But again, I just want to go through. I graduated high school in 3 years when I was 16 years old. I went to college when I was 16 and started law school before I could even drink. I was 20. I went to Hofstra University School of Law. I always knew I wanted to work for the district attorney's office. I interned there one summer, and I was thrilled to be offered a place in their class in 2001, along with, I think there were about 35 of us. Now, a lot of what I accomplished in the DA's office is accomplished by everyone who worked under Dennis Dillon, because he ran that office like a teaching hospital. His goal was for us to try cases. But I was pretty good. I was one of only a handful of assistant DAs that was put immediately into a trial part in district court. I never went through the arraignment parts, I didn't go through the traffic parts. I actually tried a case my first week. I'll never forget it. It was a petty larceny, a theft of a mattress from Sleepy's. Now, anyone who's wondering how you can steal a mattress from Sleepy's, I'm glad to talk about it after. I will tell you that when I worked in the DA's office, people love to hear stories about my day, which is pretty different than it is now on the town court. So I worked in the district attorney's office in district court, and like every other assistant DA, every other line ADA, that's what we were called, we handled 30 to 40 cases every day in a criminal court part. And when I say we handled and worked on 30 or 40 cases, we went up, we handled plea bargains, we handled bail applications, we handled hearings, we handled arraignments, whatever needed to be done on those files every single day for all 3 years that I was in the district attorney's office. Now, in addition to my daily visits to court, like all of the other DAs, I also had my own caseload. And in that course of that caseload, I was responsible for evidentiary hearings, such as Miranda hearings, Rosario hearings, Huntley, Mapp, Dunaway, whatever kind of pre-trial evidentiary hearings had to be done, as well as trying those cases. And like I said to you, Dennis Dillon was very interested in our trial practice. My bureau chief actually had a Monday morning meeting called the bagel meeting. And if you brought him a case that you could try, you could sit there and have a bagel with him and prep for your trial. They were very interested in getting us to try as many cases as possible and become excellent trial attorneys. So in the course of being in the District Court Trial Bureau, I, along with any other DA that passed through that bureau and went to county court, tried at least a dozen cases. That was the benchmark. If you tried a dozen, you could go to the Felony Bureau. So, I don't remember exactly how many years I was in District Court. After, let's say, a year, I tried my dozen and I moved on to the County Court Trial Bureau, where I then went through the grand jury and then tried cases in the Felony Bureau. And those cases we worked on under other assistant DAs. So I tried cases with the Bureau Chief of the Gangs Department, Gangs Cases, the Narcotics Division, the Sex Offense and Domestic Violence Division, the grand jury, and that was the idea, was to get as much trial practice as possible. And ultimately, when I left the DA's office, like many, many other assistant DAs, I then went and served on the Nassau County Assigned Offender Plan. Not at the same time as is alleged by Mr. Rip, which is ridiculous. So for those of you that don't know, you know in the movies when they say if you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be provided for you? I was that lawyer. They provided me to indigent defendants who didn't have a lawyer, and I did that for several years. And then Mr. Rip has brought up multiple times that I worked for a car rental agency, as if I stood behind the desk and gave out keys to people who wanted to rent cars. Not that there would be anything wrong with that. But the truth is that I was recruited by One Beacon Insurance to work for a division of theirs, a subsidiary called Auto One, which insured high-risk drivers. And since their drivers were high risk, they needed a trial lawyer, and I worked as in-house counsel for that law firm. And then I got pregnant and had my son Charlie, and I took about 6 months off and was home, and then came to work for the town. And during that time, I became an assignee on the Guardian Ad Litem plan. And I was a Guardian Ad Litem panel for surrogates court in Nassau County, and I stayed on that panel until January 1st of this year. So that's my history, and I don't hide from it. I understand there was a web page up, this outdated web page that clearly refers to me as being a newlywed and living in Queens. You know, I don't know why that was still up on the internet. I had asked over a year ago for that attorney to take it down. I don't work for his firm. I never worked for his firm. I can't speak to why people post the things they do on the internet. Boy, do I wish I could control the things that people post on the internet. But I'm again sorry to have had to take everybody's time up today listening to my history, but that's it, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it. I'm proud of it. I think I'm a relatively young woman to have accomplished what I have, and I can understand why it might seem incredible to somebody. But there you have it.
Well, I have a question. What was the basis for the assault on your record to begin with? Were records foiled or reviewed from the DA's office? I mean, what was the basis for the attack to begin with?
I can't imagine it. It was certainly easily foilable to establish that I was on the assigned counsel defender plan, that I worked for the Guardian Ad Litem panel, and for goodness sake, I was in the DA's office with about 120 other lawyers that appeared before, I don't know, 30 judges. It's all easily ascertainable.
Do you have the literature that was disseminated? statement simply reads, based on my experience in law enforcement, I find it impossible that Councilwoman Alesia could have accomplished all of her claims. All of her claims of service during her 3-year tenure in Nassau County District Attorney's Office. Is there anything beyond that statement to form the basis for the conclusion?
No, certainly not. And actually, the email he sent and the video on Facebook goes a little bit further and you know, basically outright calls me a liar.
Did anybody bolster the conclusion? Were there any colleagues of yours who said, no, you never did that, or?
No, absolutely not. And like I said, we all in the DA's office were a unit, and any of their resumes would look very similar to mine. Anyone from the DA's office would have similar credentials to mine, anyone who served under Dennis Dillon.
All right, is there anyone who has any questions of us as to what transpired this morning or regarding Councilwoman Alesia's career in the Nassau County District Attorney's Office? Brian, you have a question?
I just wanted to remind you to mention the issue with the camera.
I haven't done it yet. Just one topic at a time. All right, separate and apart from that, at least I believe separate and apart from that, this morning we were told, I don't want to reconstruct this, but Brian, can you, because I think you were the one who informed me originally, right? Have I got that right?
Sure.
There was a lot of activity going on, so the bottom line was this: I was informed when we first arrived here this morning, before we took the board, that there was some irregularities with the audio and visual equipment that's used to live stream the town's meeting. With the concerns that possibly tampering had occurred, but it really wasn't clear as to what actually took place. So we shut down. Apparently, it didn't matter because why don't you tell everybody what happened? Feel us.
Once the live stream was turned on this morning, it was pretty evident that there was a number of issues with the right-of-way, unforeseen, that we had never encountered before since we started it. The camera has been up there on that mount at a pretty fixed angle to show the town board and the person at the podium as clearly as possible. It was noticed that the angle was enhanced, so you could see the entire room, and it made it really impossible to see what was going on up here at the angle that we had intended. Additionally, there were sound issues, and it just seemed that something was off, and we figured at that point that maybe it was possible that it had been tampered with, maybe when it was turned on this morning, some type of settings had been changed or whatnot. We just felt that it was best at that point to turn it off and take it down to see, you know, what had really happened, what had transpired.
Yeah, I get it with the camera angle. It was just like too far away to be.
Yeah, you couldn't see anything up here at this point. Like it's on a delay, so if I check the feed, like I could walk to the back, look at the feed then, and like see myself walking, and I couldn't even tell which person I was in the crowd at that point. And the actual lens on it is like a fisheye lens, so everything it looks like you're looking into a fishbowl. Everything is distorted, and everything at the edges is kind of fuzzy. So at that point, you couldn't see anything up here clearly, and the volume was extremely loud in terms of the actual feed, which like way louder than normal. So
That's what I was going to ask you. What actually happened with the sound? It was more sound sensitive?
well, normally it's set up so that only the mics up here and the podium really are caught in terms of what is broadcast, and you can hear every single voice in the entire room, you know, asides, any aside that you would have with another person could be caught up there, and in terms of, and broadcast throughout. So I was back and I was listening to the feed and I heard myself say something to someone that, you know, I was all the way back there, whereas you should only be able to hear up here and this. Even when, you know, Hal or someone else gets up here and speaks, sometimes you cannot even clearly, you know, as clearly as possible, because Hal's kind of a soft-spoken guy, unlike me, you may not be able to hear him on the podium mic. So really it's intended for everyone just to hear what's going on at the podium and the dais, because that is obviously the most important action that's going on.
Okay, all right, thanks. All right, again, if anyone has any questions about anything that's been said or discussed, please